Tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video drops. In this video, we talk about a bizarre controversy involving West Virginia in the 1980s, and how they snubbed the Citrus Bowl in the worst way possible. Click the card in the upper right corner to join the channel. And now, on with our feature presentation. When you lose a game, and the head coach addresses the media in the press conference, 99.9% of the time, if the coach is talking about the team and their poor play in the losing effort, you'll see the coach talking about how the team made too many mistakes, how the team didn't execute, how the team played sloppy football or couldn't finish, or something along those lines. You get the idea. The coach will talk about the team, as in the collective body of the 50 some odd players who are on the roster, dressed on Sunday, and took the field. You will never see the coach call out one of his own players and tell him, in front of the whole world, that he absolutely stinks, that he has no business being out there on the field, and that he single-handedly cost the team the game. There are many reasons why you don't do that, from the fact that it might destroy that player's confidence, to the fact that it could cause a ton of tension in the locker room, to the fact that players won't want to play for a coach and have the back of a coach who is going to throw them under the bus the moment that things go south. But in 1977, that's exactly what happened with the Detroit Lions. This man right here is Lions head coach Tommy Hudspeth. And to open up the 1977 NFL season, the Lions had a big game against the Chicago Bears in the NFC Central. But the real drama wasn't necessarily what happened on the field. Rather, the drama was what happened off of it after the game, when Hudspeth called out his punter for choking and for costing the team the game. And let's just say that the aftermath from this was not pretty in the slightest bit, to the point why it's very clear why the Hudspeth tenure in Detroit only lasted 2 seasons, because this was not his finest hour whatsoever. Because this is the story behind the 1977 Detroit Lions, and some of the craziest punter drama in the history of the NFL. Before I talk about the punt itself and what led to the outrage, we need some context to understand how the game was going, as well as the punter in question and his role on the team. This man right here is Mitch Hoopes, and for the first 2 years of his career, he was not on the Detroit Lions. In fact, he was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in the 8th round of the 1975 NFL Draft, but bounced around between the Cowboys in 1975, the Houston Oilers in 1976, and the San Diego Chargers that same year. As for how his tenure in the NFL was going up until this point, well, it could have been going better for the Arizona punter, I'll put it that way. When one spokesman for the Cowboys was asked about whether they were satisfied with him at punter, he sighed and said, "He's done some goofy things." Hoopes had disobeyed the orders of his coaching staff a few times in order to live on the wild side. At one point, to the surprise of head coach Tom Landry, he ran a fake punt on 4th and 13. The play worked, and thank God for Hoopes that it did, because he knew that if he didn't, that he would be a dead man walking. As Hoopes said, "It crossed my mind that rookies have been cut for less than that. It doesn't take much to get cut around here." And when Hoopes wasn't fooling everyone and going rogue, he wasn't exactly doing great things booting the ball either. In 1975, as a rookie, he finished in the bottom half of the league in yards per punt average, and his longest punt of the entire season only traveled 55 yards. Among punters to average at least 2 punts per game, this was the second worst longest punt in football. And things weren't any better in 1976, when he split time in the AFC with the Oilers and the Chargers, when Hoopes was once again near the bottom of the league in yards per punt, and also had the misfortune of getting 2 punts blocked. He was not a guy that could flip the field in the slightest bit. By this point, Hoopes had been on 3 teams in 2 years, hadn't impressed on any of them, and looked like after a failed stint with the St. Louis Cardinals in training camp in 1977, that he was never going to make it in the NFL. As Hoopes said on this 1977 season, "I'm up against the wall. If I don't make it here, I'm through." The bad news for Hoopes is that he did not make it with the Cardinals, as he got cut in favor of the incumbent punter, Terry Joyce. But the good news was that he was not through. This was not his final chance. Because after he got cut by the Cardinals, the Lions, who had been struggling with their punting game in the preseason, decided to take a flyer on him. This was going to be Hoopes' last chance. For real this time. He knew that if he didn't make it in Detroit, that now, having been with 5 teams and having done next to nothing of note outside of his fake punts, he would be toast and would probably need to hang up the cleats for good. With no preseason games with the Lions and with minimal practice, since he was signed just a few days before the season opener, his first chance to make an impression was on opening day of the season against the Chicago Bears. September 18th, 1977, at Soldier Field against one of Detroit's biggest rivals. Time for Hoopes to show what he could do, and prove to the Lions and the NFL world that he belonged in the league. Oh boy. Oh boy. Where do I even begin with this one? Let's start with this punt in the second quarter, where the Lions are giving the ball back to the Bears after their drive stalls. The whole purpose of this punt is to go to the near side of the field. That's where the players on the Lions are going. That's where they're running, and obviously, you want to punt the ball where your players are going, so they can make the tackle easier and be in position. Instead, Hoopes punts it to the opposite side, and decides to punt it to the far side of the field, where the Lions are all out of sorts. What happens next, even if it might look a bit chaotic, is insanely predictable. Steve Schubert, for the first time ever in his NFL career, scored a punt return touchdown, taking it 70 yards to the house relatively easily, since there were no Lions nearby once he got down the sideline. It was the first touchdown he scored since joining the Bears, as he had a receiving touchdown during a 1974 game against the Minnesota Vikings, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Even Schubert himself was confused as to what Hoopes was doing on this play, saying that his punt deceived Detroit's own players. But it gets worse, because later in the quarter, Hoopes is back to punt again after another Detroit drive stalls. If I showed you this screenshot and told you that somehow this punt got blocked, you wouldn't believe me. It just doesn't seem possible. And yes, the snap is low, and yes, number 55 on the Lions, Ed O'Neill, is putting in a laughably bad effort when it comes to protecting and blocking. But come on. Hoopes had all day to punt this football away. He took his sweet, sweet time. There was no rush coming from up the middle. This should have been a routine play. Heck, even the Bears were baffled as to how they got a hand on this punt. Said Art Best, the man who blocked the punt for the Bears, "When you get a shrug from the outside blocker, the punter should be able to get the ball off with no trouble." Even the Bears were saying, "Yeah, we had no business blocking that. Your punter's really slow." Combine that with a punt in the second half that Hoopes shanked out of bounds for only 30 yards, and this debut with the Lions for him was ugly with a capital U. Oh, by the way, the Lions lost this game 30-20, with 7 points coming off of the punt return touchdown, and another 7 coming off of the great field position that the Bears got following the block punt. With an average punter, or a punter that just gets the ball off at a below average speed instead of the speed of the sloth from Zootopia, and a punter that just kicks the ball in the direction that his teammates are going in, the Lions might actually win this game. The Lions probably walk away from Soldier Field with a win. Instead, they start their season on an incredibly low and disappointing note, with the new punter, Mitch Hoopes, being the GOAT of the game. And afterwards, when head coach Tommy Hudspeth met with the press to talk about Hoopes' performance, oh man, he did not hold back at all. He didn't just say it was a disappointing game on special teams, or say that the team failed in that third phase. He quite literally directed all of the blame on his new punter. Before Hudspeth met with the press, he addressed his team, pointed directly at Hoopes, and said, "That man cost us this game." Then he doubled down in the press, and when he spoke to the media, said, "We've got no punter. He choked like crazy. There wasn't even a rush on the block punt. There's no excuse for a guy who is supposed to be a punter to do something like that. I don't care what level of football it is." You can imagine how this made Hoopes feel, and how it made the rest of the Lions feel as well. The fact that the coach was out there just throwing his punter under the bus, who just got there, and was not only bashing him in front of everyone in the locker room behind closed doors, but was telling the whole country about how much of a choker he is, how he's not even a punter, and how he can't make it in the NFL, well, that's absolutely pathetic on so many levels. But if you think this story's done, oh no, it gets way crazier. Because now, we have to talk about what happened after those comments. Amazingly enough, even despite those comments made by Hudspeth, Hoopes was not cut by the Lions. When the team showed up to practice on Tuesday, 2 days after the game, Hoopes was still there. And the players, in the battle between their head coach and the punter that hadn't even been there for a week, unanimously stood with their punter. There was a ton of tension in practice, to the point where a lot of the players didn't want to listen or go all out for Coach Hudspeth. As Hoopes said on what that Tuesday practice was like, the players would say things during it like, "Way to stand behind your players, coach." They were trying to make him apologize. And when Hudspeth addressed the media on Tuesday, he admitted that maybe he went a bit too far with his comments. Because Hudspeth said on his remarks, now that he had time to cool off, he's still our punter. If a punter can still punt after the comments I made, he's a heck of a punter. I put him in a bad light. So Hudspeth apologized, realized the error of his ways, and rolled with Hoopes the rest of the way. Right? Well, this is where it gets absurdly crazy, and where you realize just how terrible of a coach Tommy Hudspeth was, and that the days of Monty Clark could not come soon enough. Because 2 days after saying that, Hudspeth called Hoopes into his office and informed him that he was being released in favor of free agent punter Wilbur Summers. And the reason why? Hudspeth said that because of the comments that he made, that he dug too deep of a hole for Hoopes to get out of, and that he had to let him go. Seriously. Hudspeth used the "it's not you, it's me" line to cut his punter. Imagine if you hire someone at work, they make a mistake on the first day, you call them out in front of the entire office and say that they're a failure and that this is why the company usually doesn't hire people straight out of college. Then you apologize to them, and then 2 days later, even though they haven't made any mistakes since, you fire them, saying that after the outlandish comments that you made, that you had no choice but to let them go. Like, the logic here makes no sense whatsoever. Plus, and Hoopes realized this, where the heck is he gonna find work now that you publicly called him a choker in front of the entire country? You trashed his playing ability, and then cut him by saying that you did this to protect him, even though we know for a fact that this is not the case. And while Hoopes gave a ton of credit to his teammates for standing up for him and having his back, while Coach Hudspeth was making him out to be the world's biggest scapegoat, he had no nice things on his way out to say about his coach, and understandably so. As Hoopes said, "I think the coach pretty much put an end to my career. I'd like to say this. The guys on this team are heroes. They stood up for me. The fans really should come out and support them. I can't say much about the coaching staff, but these players are great." Hudspeth then said, "I'm not going to say anything against Hoopes. I put him in a bad spot. I'm going to live with this one." But come on! You didn't have to cut him, and you could have absolutely improved his spot, and you chose not to. No wonder players didn't like Coach Hudspeth, and why he was fired after the 1977 season. And for what it's worth, this destroyed Hoopes' career, as he never punted in an NFL game again afterwards. So if a player messes up during a game, and you're a head coach, and have to address the press, it's probably not a good idea to call him a choker, to point the blame at him, to then backtrack and say that he's your punter going forward, and then backtrack again and cut him because you already said that he's a choker, and you can't take back what you said, so you have to fire him in order to protect him. That's just not the right thing to do, and it made Coach Hudspeth look like the biggest villain in the NFL to open up the 1977 season. Because when Mitch Hoopes had a couple of errors against the Bears, in the moments after the game, Coach Hudspeth found himself jumping through a ton of hoops. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at Jaguar Gator 9. To see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.